Welcome to Solo Journeys podcast, where every journey starts with a single step. Hi everyone, today I have an honor to meet Wendy. Wendy is the counselor. I'm not familiar with this psychological gradation at all, so I'm really curious to figure out more about that. Hi Wendy.
Hi, can I call you
Sasha?
Sasha? Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm happy to share a little bit more about what a counselor is. Essentially, in North America, in England, and in other parts of the world that isn't Switzerland, a counselor is sort of equal to what we think of as a therapist. And the term psychotherapist in Switzerland is protected under specific laws in the country, which is why a counselor, such as myself, calls herself only a counselor here and does not use the term therapist. It's a little bit convoluted, but amongst the people who are coming to me to see me, my clients, they understand it as a therapist. So it's essentially the same thing. So based off of your training, if you have advanced training in a particular area, you get a specific title. And so that's essentially what differentiates us within the field. But a counselor, I would say, deals with everyday challenges. So I don't claim to treat anyone. And I think that's the important distinction here in Switzerland. So a psychotherapist can say treat depression, whereas a counselor here cannot say that. Yeah, so they would maybe help manage.
It's getting clear. What kind of issue should I have to come to you?
So it's really varied, I would say. Typically, a lot of my clients seek counseling when they start to notice that they're having mental health challenges. What does that look like, right? It's different for everybody. Some people realize that they're sad but are not sure if that sadness means they're depressed. That could be a good place to start to understand yourself better. So what I create for people is a safe space for them to figure out what's happening inside, and with a trained professional who's trained to listen. That can be difficult sometimes when you're alone and you're so muddled in your thoughts and your feelings and you're not really understanding what's happening. And so then you would come to me. It really ranges from, obviously people come from mental health issues, emotional problems, but sometimes it's also things like having difficulty transitioning. If you're recently moved to the country and you're having a hard time maybe finding community, you're having a hard time with transition from high school to college, or you're having a hard time transitioning from working life to retirement. So there's just all these stages that we go through in our lives. This space would help you process these changes, understand yourself better, but also to come up with coping strategies if you're struggling, to offer you with resources should you need them, connect you with the right people.
You're the first contact that person needs in order to understand what's going on. Is it really just maybe a seasonal depression,
right,
or is it transitional sensitivity? And then if there is bigger issue, then you probably also help to navigate how to go about it further.
So some people stay in counseling and find that to be enough. And some people find out that they have depression and that everything that they're doing is not helping, and that they would potentially like to seek medication. And so that would be an opportunity for me to refer them to a psychiatrist. Anything clinical in this sense would get transferred to a professional who deals with that.
Thank you for explanation. Now I feel myself more fit within this topic.
Good. Good.
So my next question would be, what kind of issues are the most prominent ones, the more frequent ones?
That's an interesting question, because everyone is so different, but at the same time we're all very similar,
So we're still human beings,
right?
With different needs.
Right, so it's kind of tricky to think like what is a common issue.
I'm here today also to talk about solo journeys and solo lifestyles. I had a big assumption that people are afraid to be alone, or...
I think what would be really important to distinguish is the difference between alone and feeling lonely. I certainly see a lot of people experiencing loneliness. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. So you don't need to be alone to feel lonely, and you could be with people
And you still feel lonely
and still feel
with these
lonely,
people.
and you could be alone and feel totally fulfilled and connected. Alone is just a physical state, right? There's nobody around me, so I'm alone physically. But that doesn't necessarily translate to loneliness. And loneliness would be something that you come and see me for. And I think as a basic human need, us as humans, we all need to feel connected, to feel like we're a part of something, to feel like we belong to something. And if you don't have that, you're probably going to experience a lot of mental health struggles that just come with that. So loneliness is an emotion, and I work with that. And then just the being singular, being by yourself, definitely has its struggles, right? And I feel like it could go both ways. So I mean, there's a lot to say about that. So which one would you want me to speak about? Being alone, as physically alone, or the emotion of loneliness?
I totally understand what you mean, feeling lonely. It's an emotion that you need to work with. Standing on your own in this life, in this moment, is another thing. I'm a little bit more interested in the second one, because emotions, you need to see a professional like you. Maybe we can discover the solo lifestyle together with a professional, with you, and also give some tips and see how it is from the point of view of society and psychological point of view.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about, this standing alone, depending on how your situation was. So you might come from maybe a family where you were totally stifled and you didn't really have a chance to be yourself, right? So then let's say you come from a home that your parents dictated everything you had to do. You didn't have a lot of freedom to do whatever you wanted, etc. And then you find yourself living alone. You're probably going to love it, right? Like there's just this initial of like, thank God, like I can, so there's a self-discovery that happens, which I think is really essential. And I think that a lot of people bypass this time of life because they tend to go from family to relationship to family, their own, for example, and end up maybe coming to see me later with just this feeling of, I don't know who I am. And so I've said a lot, so I'll pause. But
no, that's interesting. I came to this point maybe 2-3 years ago, and I'm 37 now. Living the whole life with yourself, and then suddenly you realize that you don't know yourself. And for me, it was more forced after my divorce, and this was punch for me to learn myself. It was not by my will, but it was more circumstances forced me. I don't regret anything. It's really an interesting journey, actually.
Yeah, but when you say punch, what were some of the things that maybe you felt unprepared for?
I was very long in relationship with my ex-husband. You are facing everything on your own. Before, I always had this strong feeling that he's behind and he's there for me.
Right.
He's still there for me, that I'm really appreciating. But I understand that he's not responsible for me anymore,
There you go. That's really important, right? Not responsible for me anymore.
He was my family. When divorce happened, I found myself that I'm pretty alone. I'm not afraid of it, but it brings certain hurdles.
Yeah, that's shocking, right? Before you may have had what some people might call a buffer. So there's just so much support that comes from being in a relationship, perhaps, or in a unit, in something that defines.
When you're married, you're in a comfort zone. You know that no matter what, you have a person next to you and you can rely.
Yeah.
And I had this strong feeling that I can always rely on my ex-husband,
Right.
And then suddenly you're out of this comfort zone. And then you go back to roots.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, so you felt that you were going back to a previous version of you, and that transition was quite difficult, or was it quite easy to get back?
No, it's a very good question. So for me, because the previous version of myself was in my home country, I would feel a little bit more safe, though it's just an assumption. And I think it's a little bit more exaggerated because I'm not originally from Switzerland.
Right, another added layer. So I think I see a lot of international people, And I think that that becomes a bigger topic from just being alone, because they come hand in hand, and this becomes the focus. Which is why I'm saying, like, when you asked me earlier, like, more reasons why people come to see me, it's these types of things. What I've seen is that when people move to a different country for whatever reason, so I think in Switzerland, a lot of the cases we see are people who moved here because they were a trailing spouse of some sort, or they were moving for a partner, right, to join a partnership. The only person that you have to rely on in Switzerland would be your partner or your spouse. And I think that that creates some dynamic that is really difficult for both parties in the long run. If you were in another country and you had just, for a healthy relationship, you had multiple different people that you could rely on for, basic things and basic needs, then this shows up less. In a country like Switzerland, where you very much need somebody, because I think also not having it being a different language. So you kind of are giving up a lot, because you essentially turn into someone who is dependent.
Highly dependent. I always understood that he needed time for his friends and his family, but I would also need this time, and for me it was difficult in the beginning to negotiate that. As a foreigner, with a local, tend to have more time consumption of this person than, of course, in your own country.
So it's totally unequal, the footing, right? This person has their whole community life here, and you just have that person. And I think that that often breeds a lot of a room for codependency, which is something that, we want to work on. But at the same time, it also creates space for things such as resentment, right? Knowing that your partner can leave, have a whole full life, whereas for you, this is in another place, in another country that's not accessible in the moment. Not to mention just how difficult it is to create your own community in a new place as an adult, or even as a young person. But it's incredibly difficult to start from scratch in creating your own community in a place where maybe it's not really an open place in that same way. I see this a lot. I just think that's not spoken about enough, and it's just really, really such a big ask to have somebody give up their lives, their comforts, their environment to join yours. So what I would recommend to couples is to have this very clearly spoken about before you start this journey together.
It requires quite a conscious approach.
Yeah.
I think here is also very important to not underestimate cultural differences, because we are from different backgrounds. Expectations in the relationship are also different. I think communication. It's all about communication and being open to listen, and also to...
Yeah.
But you cannot do it on your own. You need a tandem.
And I can also see that maybe living in a neutral place where none of you have connections, if you're a multicultural couple, could be potentially more helpful. I understand that there's obviously just practical things and basic needs of who's working, how we're going to support ourselves, etc. You might find that it's easier to understand each other if you're both living in a country where none of you have roots.
Nice.
Because you're both experiencing the same thing, right? It's
then actually it's a good check for your relationship as well.
Yeah.
Either it will survive or not.
Or not. But it would require, right, some serious show of commitment into the relationship and what this actually means to both parties. I was just thinking about the individual. So this is obviously something that could potentially work if you are a unit that is intentional about each other and where you want to be, and also the experience of the other. I think also as an individual moving to a different country, there needs to be a certain awareness about how you're going to situate yourself once you move to that place. So like you mentioned, you experienced anchoring yourself so much to your partner's family that, in the unfortunate eventuality of you separating, it meant that you lost that too. So I think it's really important for individuals to work to find community outside of the core family unit to have a more well-rounded, resource-filled, so that doesn't happen, right? Is hopefully what. So that gets really difficult, and that's why you bring in the conversation of codependency, because you start to think, okay, I cannot go out and make friends on my own. I have to be with him or her. I have to make friends with her friends. I have to be with her family. And so those things are nice, but it's really important that people are working towards creating something that is theirs, isn't tied, and I think that is often forgotten because you're so comfortable and it's not given enough attention until it's too late. So that would be something to help soften the blow should something happen. I mean, that's not what we're working towards, but it's also just healthier to have more than one way to be resourced. So it's a natural gravitation to just be with your partner and to just stay within that circle. What I'm urging people is to just be aware there was a you before there was a we, right? And that you maintain that as well, that you are cultivating this just as much as you are your personal relationship. I think that just gets often forgotten. I think there is such an important aspect of having time to be by yourself, to learn yourself in one's life span. So whether that's earlier or later in life, but I think it's necessary. So the relationship with yourself is the most important, and I think this is what people often struggle with, and people often come to see me for, is that they realize there's so much external, there's so much, pretense and masking and different types of ways of being and outside, and then they don't have anywhere to come home to, or they don't have a safe place to come home to within them. So what that means is, what is it like in your head? How do you talk to yourself? Are you nice to yourself? Are you kind to yourself? Are you encouraging to yourself, right? So oftentimes not. People are often very critical of themselves, very harsh to themselves. And so it can feel quite unbearable if this is your internal narrative, to be alone, because it forces you to engage with some of these really uncomfortable feelings or thoughts. There's a lot there. I think it's maybe getting a bit too psychological, but that's where
I actually like this point, because solo journey, this is a chance to learn yourself. This is a chance to build relationship with yourself. This is a chance to understand yourself better, who you are, what you want, and how you want. Solo journey is about building a relationship within yourself, and this is a base. And if everyone would do that, I think we would see more happy people in society.
100%.
This is
totally
exactly what solo journeys are about.
So I think it's just really such a balance between creating and cultivating community that is safe and healthy, but also creating that within yourself.
I wish I would understand this importance before, not at this age.
How do you think it would have been different had you realized earlier?
This is another human mistake. You think that, if I would know about this earlier, I would do this. And it's like, no, face the reality. It happened now, so you still have time. I'm not 90 years old woman. I still have time. That's also maybe a character or my mindset. Sometimes I fall into this concept that
we all do.
If I would know better,
But when you think about it, you needed to almost experience certain things to know, to be where you're at now. Solo journey might have not been a thing.
I still believe, even though I fall into this trap sometimes, I still think that everything happens for a reason, and everything happens at the right time. So there's no, it would have been. There's just no this concept.
I struggle with the statement, everything happens for a reason. Yes. As a counselor, I'll just say that's not always true. Some things are really just nonsensical and are just horrible things that happen, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. But I understand the sentiment. I know what you mean.
Also a good point, because I need to take care. Sometimes you try to explain things and maybe comfort yourself that something happened to you. Thank you for this note. It's an important one. Wendy, do you think your profession helps you to build your relationship because you are more conscious about the personal needs and you give more space, like what we discussed?
You mean my personal relationship? God, no. It doesn't. I wish. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human. And my ability to do this with people at work doesn't translate in my personal life, particularly. I just become myself. And so we fall into the exact same problems as everybody else. And I need as much help and support as everybody else. That's kind of a myth. Like, there's no truth to that at all. Maybe I can see things early and signal to get the help, but it doesn't mean that things are smooth all the time. No, we still have to work.
Can you say that understanding importance of building a relationship with yourself helps your relationship building?
Definitely. That's the most important thing almost before you partner, is that you have a relationship with yourself. It helped me maybe in choosing a partner that was better for me. People can see that in you.
Could you say that it will help also to find a right partner if you already have made the homework of building a relationship with yourself?
Yes, 100%. Because if not, you end up in this really unhealthy cycle of being with people who are not particularly right for you. So there's not a lot of conscious work that's going into your partnering. Often a lot of people experience that. They're kind of in this repetitive cycle of dating the same kind of guys or same types of girls, but not really understanding how they fall into this and why. So yeah, that pre-work, just learning who you are, what's important to you, what your needs are, in attracting the right mate and in spotting the right mate. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are happy with yourself, if you are aligned with yourself, you're aware, it's not a shock, have a good relationship with yourself, chances are how you show up in the world will be different. You're likely to, like we talked about, attract different types of people. You're likely to create and form more connections, which might help with feeling lonely. So that's one aspect. But also, if you are comfortable with who you are, you're not looking outside for others to fulfill that. And not feel like I need someone to make me feel like a person or make someone feel like me. There's like enough comfort and love that you give yourself that you don't need to look for it outside. There's a lot of fun things you can do by yourself. And it's like, do you enjoy your company? Do you just like being with you? Like doing a yoga session by yourself and just having so much fun. Sometimes that can happen. Have a day where you bake a cake, dance in the living room and do yoga, and you have way more fun than when you're with someone the whole day. We need people, but we also don't really need people.
If I don't match with the person well, for me it's difficult to enjoy the time. For example, being aware who fits, who are you matching with.
And how do you know that?
You build a relationship with yourself.
Getting to know yourself better. Yeah. What are your values? What are things that you like, agree with, align with, don't align with? Yeah. That helps you meet like-minded people. That helps you meet like-valued people. And also very quickly tells you, ooh, this person, not for me. And there's nothing wrong with you if a certain person doesn't match you. That comes with this inner dialogue of like, oh, what's wrong with me? I should have, you're not for everyone. And that's...
Exactly, and not everyone is not for...
is for you, exactly. Protect your peace, protect your energy.
What would be your message to our listeners? One key point.
Go to therapy. No, I mean, therapy is important. Counseling therapy is important for if you're experiencing any emotional issues, you want to get to know yourself better, you want to show up differently in the world. This is a good first step, and to kind of take away that stigma from, oh, I have to be sick to go to therapy. No, everybody needs some aspect of this. Something to take away. Very important to develop a relationship with yourself. If it doesn't feel like home inside of you, then you need to work on this. You need to feel like home to come home to. I think that's the most important thing. Because we were born solo, we're going to leave solo. It's really important to have a good relationship with yourself.
Totally agree with you on the point that go to therapy. Therapy, unfortunately, has a little bit negative meaning. When I was going through divorce, I thought I can do that, I'm fine. And now I do talk to a psychologist. So helpful in the end. I should have done it earlier.
Yeah.
And mental health, it should be a priority.
Investing in your mental health is just as important as any other investment that you make. And I think that what you said is very important, that taking away the stigma attached to therapy, because you said it sounds bad, it sounds like, okay, something must be wrong. And I think that that's just so unfortunate. It's been for so long, and in certain countries more than others. And I think we've come to a good place now where people are a lot more accepting and understanding. And to be honest, you don't have to share this with anyone, right? It's completely confidential, so it's just for yourself.
Super helpful. Start with basics. Basically, start with basics. See the world changing around you.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.